So welcome to the third topic, borrowing, in the webinar series, What's Next? Pivoting from high school into future. In this webinar, we're going to explore the role of borrowing money to buy things when we can't pay for the entire purchase up front. And a classic example of this type of picture using borrowed money are major purchases like buying a house or a car, or perhaps more modest purchases with things costing more money than we have in our wallets at the moment. And a classic example of these types of purchases happen when we use credit cards to pay for stuff like groceries or gas for our car. And today's speaker, Mr. Nathan Belker, is going to be exploring with us borrowing basics, specifically the relationship between borrowing money and debt and credit. So sit back, relax, and learn or relearn what borrowing money is all about. Also, just as a heads up, at the end of today's presentation, we are going to be having a drawing for a $30 Amazon e-gift card. And so what we would ask is that the students complete a short anonymous survey because your feedback is very important to us as presenters. Now, by way of introduction, Mr. Belker is a mathematician who has this really cool job at Mercantile Bank, and he works with numbers. So I'm going to share this next slide, which shows a little bit about what he does, if I can figure out how to get this next slide up. So as I said, Mr. Belker is a mathematician and he works with numbers, specifically financial data. And through coding, he creates financial models. So what he does is he looks for patterns in numbers in the numerical data, and it's called financial data visualization. And we see that on the left. And what he then does, he takes those patterns that he can see, and then he simplifies those by creating financial models that executives where he works in the bank can then utilize to make business decisions. So for example, he'll create graphs like like we see under that cash flow there, we see a bar graph. He's looking at balances over time, and so we see graphs. And so he takes what appears to be very, very complicated and simplifies it so that business executives can then use that to make informed decisions. And so without further ado, let me just give you a little bit of Mr. Belker's background. He is a graduate from the University of Missouri and the University of Kansas with degrees in mathematics and applied mathematics and statistics. So again, he is a numbers guy, and without further ado, Mr. Belker.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you, Suzanne, for that warm introduction. Those slides you put up are uncannily familiar. I can't tell you, on my desktop right now, I have about 15 of those things running in the background. So been working on them all morning, and yeah, it's very uncannily familiar. I'm going to share my screen. I have a slide deck here, and I think if I do this right, I'm going to share the whole screen. So today we're talking about borrowing basics. And like Suzanne said, the relation between borrowing money and your credit history and your interest rates that are on loans that you might take out to purchase a car or a house. So we're going to go through this. We're going to take it easy, and hopefully I can break this down in a way that will help arm you with some knowledge before you go into a lender and take out a loan. So here we are, intro slide. That's just my picture. I gotta control this. I'm gonna start here. What I'd like for you to do, whether you're listening to the recording or you're here now, is write down one thing that you want to buy right now. Anything from a PS5 to an iPhone, a new car, a house. something like that. And then roughly how much you think it costs or how much you want to spend on it. If you're not sure, say in the example of a car, we've got new cars, used cars, of varying different prices. I would suggest a quick Google search, or, if you already know kind of what you want to spend, then you can, shop for a car that fits that budget, or fits that spending amount. Same thing with like a PS5 or a MacBook Pro, right? Or something like that. The internet is your friend, and it's okay to shop around and price shop and look for the best prices and the best deals. So now that you've got that one thing written down,
I'm
I'm going
picking
to open it.
I'm picking a big screen TV, by the way, for me. So I'm going to
Big
say,
screen.
yeah.
Okay, big screen TV. I'm gonna pick a MacBook Pro. I
And
really want a brand new MacBook Pro, with all of the latest and greatest technological updates in there. Since I'm a numbers guy and I use computers and I code a lot, I need a lot of memory and RAM, so I'm gonna get all the upgrades. In
so I'm
my
looking at around
hypothetical.
5,000.
Yep, around 5,000. So what I'm gonna do is really quick, we're going to come back to this a couple times, but I'm going to show this this web page. This is a website called bankrate.com, and bankrate.com is an informational website. You can find information on loans, on what different loan terminology means, investing. You can learn about credit cards. You can just about anything financial that you want to know a little something about. It's probably on here. And they've got a series of really great calculator tools that I use personally in my life, when I'm thinking about borrowing money, because it helps me model out what taking on a debt would look like. So I just want to point out a couple things really quick, just so you see it once, before we come back to it. The way that this works is we fill in these boxes on the left, and then our output, our calculations, come out here on the right. So in my example of, say, a brand new MacBook Pro, I'm going to say I'm going to spend $5,000 on that, and the loan term is the amount of time that you're going to be making payments on that. So I've got 5 years, or it converts to 60 months. And I'm going to put the interest rate up here at 23%, assuming I'm going to use something like a credit card to make this purchase, hypothetically. And then I hit calculate, and it will tell you what your monthly payment should be, roughly. It will tell you the principal. The principal is the original amount of money that we borrow to make our purchase. And then it's going to tell you the total interest paid. And in order to get a total loan payoff, right? What does the whole thing cost me? It's the sum of these two numbers. So that's about $3,500. So my total is going to be about $8,500 to buy a $5,000 MacBook, and pay it off over 5 years at 23%. The other thing that this tool does is you can hit this show amortization schedule here, and it will actually map out your payments, roughly, for the next 5 years. So you can kind of see how long you're paying, how many months, right? Until that loan gets down to a zero balance, in which case it's paid off. And you'll see your interest go down over time, how it goes up and increases, right, with compounding, and then decreases again when it hits its peak somewhere here in the middle. So that is the way to use this tool. So I just wanted to point some of those things out. We're going to come back to this in a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the slides. So we're talking about borrowing money, getting a loan to make a purchase for something that you might not have enough money for right now today to be able to afford. And there's some questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about borrowing money. Why do you want to borrow the money? Can you afford the monthly payments on a loan if you borrow that money? Where's the money going to come from within your budget? How long will it take you to pay off the money that you borrow? In the example I just shared, I picked 5 years. It's sort of arbitrary in that tool, but for things like a house or a car, they're pretty long payment cycles. A house can go out 30 years. That's 30 times 12 payments, right? And for a car, 5 years, 60 months. If you take a loan out for a car, that's 60 payments of whatever that loan payment is for the next 5 years monthly. And then what is the best borrowing option for your needs and capabilities? But the bottom line here is look before you leap, understand your options, understand what you're getting into when you borrow money. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, acid test, to borrow or not to borrow? That is the question. Before you make a decision to borrow money, and you will encounter scenarios where you go into Best Buy and you want to buy that PS5 and they say, hey, you want to open a Best Buy credit card and put it on there? We'll save you, X amount of percent or whatever. They're going to give you a loan right then and there. Usually I like to wait about 24 hours before I make a decision to borrow money like that. So it's okay, wait 24 hours. And if you're not, feeling like you want to borrow money for the item that it is you want, in this example of, say, a PS5 at Best Buy, there's always the alternative approach. You can always set aside a little bit of money from your budget every month for the next couple months, 3-4 months, and then go in and pay cash for it. So that is always an option. And when you pay cash for an item, you don't pay any interest on borrowing that money. And we'll talk about that again here pretty soon. The bottom line is borrowing money is not free. You have to pay it back with interest, which we'll see. So the question, when is borrowing money really necessary? When the item is something that you really need, but can't pay for all at once, like a car to get to work, so you have a job so that you can earn income to pay off the car loan, but then also have money for groceries and other things that you want or need. Or when the item is something you really need and can't pay for all at once, and that increases in value over time, like a house. You buy a house, the house will hopefully appreciate in value. So what I mean by that is if you spend $100,000 on a brand new house today, you're making loan payments on that house for the next 15 to 30 years. Let's say in 15 years, you need to sell that house. The idea is that you can sell it for a little bit more than you paid for it. So it costs you $100,000 initially, but maybe you can turn around and sell it for $125,000, and you walk away with an extra $25,000 in your pocket at the end of the loan. If you sell the house before the loan is paid off, you still make some money if the house appreciated in value, but you have to take the proportion of that $125,000 profit or the $25,000 profit on the house. You'll have to pay off the remaining balance on the loan, and then you get what's left over. But the idea is that the home appreciates in value, and you get a little bit of extra in your pocket at the end. If you have to move, maybe you don't have to, and that's okay too. So remember what happens when you borrow money. When you borrow money from a lender or a creditor, you create debt. So from the savings and budgeting class, we talked about, I think that we probably talked about how when you put money in a savings account, you get compound interest that basically pays you over time. So you increase the value of your savings with compound interest. When you borrow money, compound interest works against you. It's negative compound interest. So you pay interest on the principal, and as that builds up, you end up paying interest on the interest, and it can accumulate in that way, and it works against you because that's money you have to pay back. It's the exact opposite situation of saving. Albert Einstein's quote is great. It says, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. That's the savers and the borrowers. But the idea here is that if you take out debt, you are the one responsible for paying that loan back. Therefore, you are the one paying the interest on that money that you borrowed. So when you borrow money, you create debt. Debt is money that you owe a person or a business. Let's say in this very high level scenario, a lender provides you with $1,000, and you as the borrower have to pay back that principal balance of $1,000, plus you pay back, like I just mentioned, the interest, the negative compound interest that accumulates on that principal balance. You pay interest on the principal, you pay interest on the interest, and that has sort of a snowball effect that's working against you until that loan is paid off. Thus the snowball picture here. So let's talk about the types of loans. There's two primary camps for loan types. The first is an installment loan, which I usually call a fixed loan, meaning that the lender provides you all of the money up front for, say, purchasing a house or a car. They give you the money, you buy the thing that you want, and then there are fixed loan payments that are due at the same time every month until that loan, the term runs out and the loan is paid off. So in the instance of a mortgage or a home, say it's a 15-year fixed loan, that means that you get all of the money to buy the house up front, and then you make payments on it for every month for 15 years. And at the end of that time, it's scheduled out so that that loan balance is $0 at the end of that loan term. That's a fixed loan. And then there's revolving loans. Revolving loans are, for example, like a credit card. The loan is an open access sort of to a fixed amount of money or a set amount of money. So if you have a credit card that you can have up to $3,000 on, say, you don't have to have any money on that credit card. You don't have to be making payments on it unless you use the credit card, and you don't have to use the credit card for the full amount available to you. You could take the credit card and spend $150 to purchase groceries at the local supermarket. And when that happens, when you swipe the card and you borrow that $150, now you're responsible to start making payments on it until you pay off the $150, at which point that the balance on the card is reset to $0 once it's paid off. And then the following months after that, you don't have to continue making payments on it. It's just available for you to use again if you choose to do so. So the payments are repaid based on how much you borrowed, and it ranges anywhere from a minimum payment, minimum monthly payment in the case of a credit card, to a total payoff. So one option you have when you swipe your credit card for those groceries is you could pay off the whole $150 by the end of the month, and then you don't pay any interest on it. Or you could say, it's going to take me 3 months to pay off those groceries. So you pay about $50 a month for 3 months. But after you cross into those subsequent months, you start paying a little bit of interest on that as well. The duration of that loan in that example I just provided was 3 months, based on $150 of groceries, $50 a month. Takes me about 3 months to pay it off. That's how a credit card works. It's all based on how much you swipe and how long you want to make payments on it before you pay it off, which can be a very small amount or pay it all off at once at the end of the first month, but you're always responsible to pay a little bit of something every month until that's paid off.
Nathan, I
Yeah.
got a suggestion. Why don't we go back to that slide? Do you think we could we could pull up that loan calculator again and do some calculations with different sizes of payments, like maybe one with a minimum payment? Oh, no, go back again. Go.
Right here.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay.
And
Did I blow past? I blew past.
no,
slide
actually,
6,
you
didn't
got
I?
it. This is the moment.
Okay.
Pull up that loan rate calculator. We'll go ahead and let's maybe I don't know. You want to work with that $5,000 purchase,
Yep. Yeah, I'll do that.
and let's try it with a minimum payment. And then we've got a suggestion, which is what do you think? Increase the payment and see the impact of that.
Yep, absolutely. So let's do that here. So let's say, okay, we're going to go back to this example. I want a brand new MacBook Pro. It's going to cost me $5,000. And here's my loan calculator. And I want to point out, so let's say I'm going to put this on a credit card at a 23% interest rate. And I want to, and I think about this and I say to myself, well, you know, $140 a month is a lot of money. What happens if I, you know, decide to stretch this out? I want to lower my payments. So I want to take longer to pay it off. I'm going to reduce my payments by increasing the length of time I'm making payments. So I'm going to go from 5 years to 9 years. And I'm going to hit calculate. So now that's better. That saved me about $30 a month. But I want you to pay attention to what happened here with the interest paid. It went from $3,500 to $6,800 about, which is a pretty big jump. That means that at this interest rate, the longer I take to pay this $5,000 principal balance off, it increases the amount of interest I'm paying over the life of that loan. So what started as a $5,000 MacBook Pro now has become an almost $12,000 MacBook Pro that's going to take me 9 years to pay off. If I decided, you know, $140 at 5 years, I could maybe do a little bit more than that. So I'm going to pay it off shorter. I'm going to pay it off in 2 years. My payments are $261.87 a month. My original principal balance, $5,000 plus about 13, that's 1,284. So I'm just going to round up to $1,300. So my $5,000 MacBook Pro over a loan term in for 2 years or 24 months at 23% interest now is about a $6,300 MacBook Pro. I like that better personally. If I can budget for $261 a month, I'm paying far less interest over time, right? And the difference between 2 years and 9 years, jumping all the way up to $6,800, like that's a lot of cash I could do something else with over that time period, right? So the idea here is you can decrease your payments, your monthly payment amount by stretching the loan term out longer. But doing that also increases the interest that you're paying on that principal balance because it has longer to accumulate and compound over time.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So if I pay it off over a shorter period of time, what I'm hearing you say is that I'm going to pay less interest, and sure, my payment goes up, but the benefit is I'm paying less interest.
Yep. Overall, the item costs less for you to purchase
if you pay it off faster.
If you can pay it off faster, that is correct.
You know, I'm looking at my if I look at a credit card statement, like I'm looking at $5,000,
Mhm.
as the amount I'm going to borrow. If I remember correctly, a minimum payment is anywhere from 1% to 2% of that amount.
Mhm.
So let's say the minimum payment in the real world then is, say, $75 a month. That's 1.5% of 5,000. Can we try that? Amount of a payment and see how, will this calculator let us do that?
I don't know that this one will let us do that, but you know what we could do is eyeball it. So 1.5% of 5,000 is
$75.
$75. And I want to do 18, calculate 97, that's going the right way. Let's say 25, 96. Man, it's not changing much. It's just messing with the
Okay.
idea here, Suzanne, is that if I put this on a credit card and I make less than, payments around the $75 mark, I'm virtually never going to touch that principal balance. And what you can see happening is I push the loan term out to 35 years, and you could
Yeah.
just keep going with that, right? You could,
Yeah.
I can't even do 50.
So what we're seeing right here is if I or if a borrower chooses to just pay the minimum payment, we're going to be making those payments for a long time.
Forever.
And,
Forever.
basically
As long as
forever.
you-
And we're
yeah,
almost, yeah, it's going to be very, very difficult to pay that loan off.
yeah,
So the takeaway that I'm getting here is when working with a credit card is, if possible, it's always a good idea to pay more than the minimum amount. And
Yep.
then if I get into trouble and for some reason I can't make my payment, pay as much that month, I can always go back to the minimum payment.
Yep.
But once my budget will allow me, I've got more money coming in at that point. What I want to
Yep.
do it then is start increasing the payment amount again.
Exactly. And
Got
just as an example, in this example here, I stretched it out to 40 years on
Yeah,
a $5,000 original purchase. I mean, who wants to pay for a MacBook for 40 years? I mean,
yeah,
that's $41,000 in interest paid over that 40 years for
yeah,
something that only cost me $5,000 to begin
yeah.
with.
And it doesn't,
So
yeah,
yeah,
okay,
and that will continue going forever if we don't make more than the minimum payment. Because to answer your credit card statement question, many times the minimum payment amount is only the interest that accumulates on the principal. So for instance, if I swipe my credit card for $5,000, the very first statement I receive will be the interest I need to pay on that principal balance in minimum, right? The just paying the interest only and not really ever affecting the original $5,000. And if I just keep doing that, I never touch it. It will just go forever. So you're absolutely right.
Got
So
it.
paying more is a great idea.
All right.
So we've talked about revolving loans, credit cards. We've talked about fixed loans. We're going to talk about the terms that I'm using. Principal, I think I mentioned this already, but the principal is the amount of money that we borrowed. The interest is the total amount of money the financial institution charges for allowing you to use their money in the first place. And then the fees, there can be fees and things charged in addition to that. For instance, if you were to purchase a home, there are closing costs and there are transactional fee, like one-time fees when we're booking that loan that are paid by you, the borrower, up front. So there are fees associated, but the big thing to take away from this slide is that the banks or the creditors, they have to tell you what those things are upfront before you ever borrow the money. They will tell you how much the principal is, how much interest you'll be paying, and what any associated fees are with borrowing that money. so that you can make an informed decision on whether or not you want to borrow that money. They'll also talk to you about the interest rate that you'll be charged. That's not just the money itself that you're paying, but what that rate actually looks like. So you'll be able to make an informed decision before you actually borrow the money. That's a great time to get all of the details on a loan, and then take a step back and really look at that documentation and understand what it means for you and how it will impact your budget.
So if I don't like what, if maybe the interest rate's too high, or, as I look through it, if I don't like what I see, I don't have to borrow that money.
That is
I
correct.
could go to another bank or a credit union and see what terms they have available. So as a borrower, we do have choices.
Yes.
And
Shop around. Shop
yeah.
the interest rate, right?
Yep.
There are lots of different lenders lending for many different reasons. You are always encouraged to rate shop to get the best deal on for the item that you want to buy. In the event that you're purchasing a house, interest rates on mortgage loans right now are pretty low, historically low, 3.25 to 4.5, somewhere in there. But just that difference, 3.25 to 4.5, is, jumping up from 3.25 to 4.5. That's a difference of thousands and thousands of dollars.
Over 30
That's
years
a
or
1.25% difference. And over a fixed term loan, like 30 years, 1.25% difference is huge on a purchase where your principal balance amount is anywhere from 75 for a modest house to, you can look on Zillow right now and see houses priced at the 1 point something million dollar mark. So, a 1.25% difference on a $500,000 loan is a lot of money in interest. So, and I apologize, they're testing the sirens outside right now. Can't stop that. Bear with me here. So, yes, encouraged to rate shop. I want to talk really quickly. I wanted to hit this. There's a third type of loan. It's rather dangerous, and I would encourage you to. I would encourage you to walk, not run, from payday loans. Payday loans are loans that are structured to give you access to money before you receive your paycheck from your employer. So let's say you get paid on Friday, but it's Tuesday and you really need money now. You could go to a payday loan place and they would give you money. They would lend you money against your upcoming paycheck, and they say, well, when you get your money back on Friday, then you come and you pay this back. The problem with these is that they're really set up to take advantage of, in most cases, very desperate situations. Apologize again for that. They are usually charging interest rates in the 130s to 350% on that money. So you borrow $300, you're owing at even a modest interest rate, you're owing an extra 60, 70 bucks every time you have to go in and make a payment on that. It's astronomical. So they really take advantage of desperate situations when somebody really needs money. They're not safe loans. It's not a snowball, it's an avalanche. And it will just bury you in a mountain of interest payments. So if you see those, run, don't walk away, find another option if you can. They're just not safe, and they're structured in a way to take advantage. So debt, it is all in how you approach it. We're going to talk about how to manage debt well. There are aspects of well-managed debt. Gosh, the thing just won't stop, will it? I apologize. Um, it's all in how you approach debt. Well-managed debt, on-time payments, affordable payments that fit your budget. Keep your debt to income ratio. That is, your debt to income ratio is the ratio of how much money you owe for a loan or a collection of loans relative to your income that you earn every month or every year, however you decide to calculate that. Try to keep your debt at about 35% or less of the income that you take in. So if you earned $1,000 a month, you should try to keep your debt, your loan payments at or below $350 a month in order to fit your budget. That is an aspect of those are aspects of well-managed debt, and well-managed debt increases your credit score, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But those are aspects of managing debt well. Be careful. Poorly managed debt can be like a ball and chain. If you have more than 35% of your income consumed by making debt payments, or they're payments that you can't afford in your monthly budget, they become never-ending payments, and it leaves very little room and money left over to actually enjoy your life, your social life, or even, you know, the groceries you can afford to buy, things like that. So be very careful in how you manage your debt. You know, I've in my personal life, I've tried not to take on too many debt payments at once. If there are things or multiple things that I want to buy, one thing that I try to do is I categorize those things based on how much I need them and when. And if I need to take out a loan to make a purchase, I will try to pay that loan off before I take on another loan. Because what that does is once one loan is paid off, I no longer have that debt payment. I will then be freed up within my budget to take on a new debt payment for the next thing that I want. So I think through very carefully before I borrow money, in terms of the things that I want and the things that I'm going to buy, and I try to space them out in a way that will make sense. We don't need to have everything up front, but I'll tell you, if I needed to borrow $10,000 to put a new roof on my house, I would want that to come before the next winter, right? So I would do maybe that one first and then pay that off. And then maybe I would borrow another $5,000 to fix the cement in my driveway, say, you know, that one can come later. So think about that when you're borrowing money and the things that you want to purchase and how you can space them out to avoid taking on too much debt at once. Taking the credit card plunge. Tips for responsible credit card use. This is within the idea of managing our debt well. Credit cards can very, very quickly get out of hand if you put too much on the card and you only make minimum payments, as we talked about earlier. It can get out of hand really quick. And we saw in that example where for 40 years, you know, you end up paying 40 some odd $1,000 for a MacBook Pro that only cost you $5,000 to begin with, and you never really touch that principal balance. That's a situation where the interest, the negative compound interest, is building up quicker than you can pay it off. And we don't obviously want to be in that situation. So tips for using a credit card responsibly. Only use the credit card to purchase items that you can actually pay off when the credit card payment is due. A really interesting thing about credit cards is you don't actually pay any interest if you purchase an item and pay it off within the same month. It's almost like using it for cash. So if you get paid, or if you go swipe your card for those $150 worth of groceries, that's my grocery budget because I'm married and have 2 kids. And so we, eat a lot of food at home. So, if I swipe my credit card for $150 in groceries and I pay it off before, the end of the month or before my statement cycles, I don't pay any interest on that. The other thing that you want to do is make payments on time every month, even if you're in a situation where you can only, you're positioned only to be able to make the minimum payment. If I purchase $150 in groceries and I'm paying 23% interest on that, when that balance carries over, I'm going to be paying, around $35, $40 in interest at a minimum. I want to pay that on time and then deal with that as money is freed up in my budget to accommodate the original purchase. And then limit your use of available credit. So on a credit card, we talked about this idea of as a revolving loan, it has a fixed amount, a set amount of money that you have access to. So if you have a credit card with a limit of $1,000, that means that you can use up to $1,000, but you don't have to use that much. You can use as little as $1. And then you're responsible to pay that $1 back. This is sort of a rule of thumb. It impacts your credit score, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Try to keep your use of your credit cards within 10% of their available credit. So if you have $1,000 limit on your credit card, try to only put $100 on there at a time before it's paid off again, and then you can use it again, right? So keep that debt usage of the credit card at or below 10% of your available credit. If you have $3,000 credit limit on your card, then you can do $300 is the 10% mark before you pay that off, and so on and so forth. Or I guess jumping back, the last point just says pay off your balance in full every month when it's due. That's obviously if I put $150 in groceries, I can pay off the $150. I'm not using or paying any interest on that, and I've used less than the 10% as the statements cycle on.
And yes, we're not paying any interest because it's been paid off within, I believe they call that a grace period. Is that right, Nathan?
Yeah. So the way that most credit cards work is when you put money on a card in a given month, and then you pay off the card within the same month or within the same statement cycle, they don't actually charge accrued interest to the card. So they don't bill you the interest on the card until you carry that balance over to the next month. Okay. So in the event that I spend $300 or $150 on my credit card for groceries, and I decided I wanted to pay $50 per month, I would pay $50 the first month, and then $100 gets carried over to the next month, and they charge me 23% interest on that. So now I owe $123.
So it's really important for me to know, verify what the grace period is, so I know when I absolutely have to pay it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the way the compounding, the interest is charged when the statement or when the card cycles at its statement time. So if you use the card and pay it all off within the same month, when the statement goes to cycle, it looks at your balance and it says 0, and then no interest is charged. And so that I would say the grace period, if we want to call it that, is purchases within the same month and paid off within the same month. Don't get charged interest. So we're talking about credit now. So we talked about credit limit on a credit card. Credit is there are different concepts, and this gets a little bit tricky. So bear with me, and I'll try to make it clear. Credit is we're now going to talk about the similarity between credit and debt, and both concern money, and that's true. Debt is the money you owe a business, right? For the money that you borrowed. Credit is what the business extends to you. From the business side, they are extending you credit, right? On a credit card. You have a $1,000 credit limit. They've given you $1,000 of credit. That is different than your credit score, which is more like your personal financial history. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. How does credit differ from debt? Credit is the ability to borrow money, or in the event that we're talking about a credit card, your credit limit is the $1,000. That's the credit that the creditor has extended to you. There's a lot of credits in there. But it's important to understand that the credit is your ability and how much money you have the ability to borrow, and debt is the actual money that you owe, that you have to return to the person or business that you borrowed from. Credit approval. In order to become eligible to use a credit card, you have to apply, and they evaluate your credit history, your personal financial history, to determine if you are eligible to have a credit card, and to determine if you are eligible to have credit extended to you. So your credit history is like your personal financial history, your ability to borrow money, and what your credit score and your credit history shows is how well you manage debt. And we'll talk about that. And the other thing that they look at when determining whether or not you are eligible to have credit extended to you is your capacity. So they look at two things. They look at your credit history, they look at your capacity, where your capacity is sort of like your ability to repay over time. Your credit history is how well have you managed the debt you've already had. So we're going to talk about credit as character. This would be more like your credit score. Credit scores range from very low numbers, 0 to 850. There are a couple different credit score models out there. We've probably heard of things like Experian and Equifax, right? Those are companies that have scoring models that evaluate your credit history, and they come out as a number. So they'll go from 0, meaning you have almost no credit history, and if you manage your debt very, very well, your credit score will be very high. It will be up in the 700, 800 range. Or if you manage your credit poorly, it will be lower. It will be in the 500-600 range. So it's important to pay your bills on time. It's important to pay off your credit card every month if you're able, because those things positively impact your credit history, and they will push your credit score higher. And when your credit score is higher, you get access. What it means to a lender is that you are a responsible person. You're not a risky investment. If they are going to loan you money, there's a very good chance you'll be able to pay them back. And because your credit score is higher and you've maintained your financial reputation well, you will have access to lower interest rates. And lower interest rates impact how much interest you pay over time. So we're going to jump back over to this credit calculator, loan calculator here. And I'm going to go back to my 5-year scenario. This is still our $5,000 state-of-the-art MacBook Pro, brand new off the shelf. I've swiped it on my credit card. I want to pay for it for 5 years. I'm going to pay $3,457 in interest, meaning the total to pay off my credit card is around $8,500 if I pay $140 a month. Remember, this is loose. With a credit card, I could pay the minimum 1 month. That would stretch it, and adjust as we go to fit your budget.
And that's with a really high interest rate.
That is with a really high interest rate.
That's why the interest is so large.
Yep. So what I'm going to do is, let's say in this scenario, I've managed my credit history and my loan payments and my debt so well that I have access to the very lowest rates. So let's change that from 23 to 12%. And I want you to see what happens. I didn't change the term, still 5 years. My payments dropped from $140 to $111. And the interest I'm now paying on that purchase was cut in half, about $1,600, almost $1,700 versus $3,500 where it was before, just because I've reduced my interest rate. And I've reduced my interest rate not by asking, I qualified for that interest rate because I represent a low risk investment because I've managed my credit history and my loans and my debt very well. Does that make sense? I'm hoping that all makes sense.
Yes, it does. And if we go back to the slide, we've got tips, right?
Yes.
That are going to help us be responsible borrowers so that we
Yep.
can be out qualified for those lower interest rates. So,
Yep.
yeah.
So here, yes, so exactly. So here are the tips to increase your credit score. By increase your credit score, I mean, build your reputation positively, right? Pay all of your bills on time every month. Even if you have to pay a little bit on your existing credit card because your budget changed this month and this month you want to pay the minimum. Pay the minimum, or if you can, pay more than the minimum, but pay the minimum at least on time. If you have a fixed loan for a car and your bill is $100 a month at the same time every month, always make that payment on time. That's one of the biggest factors of building a solid credit reputation is paying your bills on time. If possible, tip number 2, pay your credit card bill in full every month. What that does is it shows that, hey, they have access to credit, they're using their credit, and they're paying off their credit card bill every month, and they're not paying. It shows that you're a savvy borrower, a savvy credit card user, right? That will increase your credit score. It doesn't matter quite as much as paying all your bills on time. Pay all your bills on time. When you can, pay your credit card bill in full every month and limit your usage of that credit card, tip number 3, to 10% or less of the credit limit, so that it shows that you have access to money, but you're using it at 10% or less of what that money you have access to is actually allowing you. And then if we back up a second, I said that the 2 determining factors were your credit and your capacity. Your capacity, very loose definition, is your ability now and in the future to make all of your debt payments on time, right? So tips for staying in your capacity, within your capacity once you start working. Steady employment. Earn your, you earn an income, you get a paycheck every week, every 2 weeks, however your employer pays you. Have that steady income flowing in so that you can repay any debts that you have. Tip number 2, budget for your debt payments. So if you have a job and you earn $1,000 a month, or $1,000 every 2 weeks, so let's say $2,000 a month, and you have a car payment that is $100 a month, put that in your budget so that at the end of the month, really you don't have $2,000, you have $1,900 left over to work with, right? You take those loan payments out of your budget at the top, and then what's left over you allocate to savings and spending on rent and getting your groceries and things like that. Budget for it. Tip number 3, avoid excessive debt. Too many credit cards open at once with too many dollars on them, right? We talked about negative compound interest and how if you're only making minimum payments, those interest negative compound interest will snowball and just build over time. And if you have 2 or 3 credit cards all doing the same thing, that can be very hard to deal with. So avoid having too many credit cards. Avoid having too many loans, right? I have a mortgage, I have a car payment, and that's about it. I don't want to have more than that.
So the debt to income ratio that you mentioned
Yes.
before, I believe you said 35% or less?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
35% or less. And that includes fixed loan payments and credit card debt, right? We're talking about debt in totality, 35% or less of your income, and budget for it so that you can make those payments. If you put money on a credit card, your number one choice should be pay it off in full if you can, so you don't pay the interest. Choice number 2 is pay more than the minimum so that it can actually be paid off. Because if you just make minimum payments, we saw it's stretched out to infinity, and $40,000 on a $5,000 MacBook those are not good numbers by any stretch of the means. And then tip number 4, if disaster strikes, let's say you have steady income and all of a sudden your hours are reduced at your office or your work, or you lose your job, right? All of a sudden you have no income, or very much less income than you had planned on. And now your debt to income ratio has expanded from 35% to 70% because your income was cut in half. Your number one thing, there are practical ways to deal with this. The number one thing that you should do, the first thing you should do when that happens, is call the lender or the creditor that you borrowed money from, or your credit card company, and speak with them, let them know what's going on, and ask about alternative repayment methods, right? There are instances where a lender is able to restructure debt for a period of time to allow you time to find a new job, or to allow you time in a way that you can afford, right? And that may impact your credit score, but it also shows that you've done your part, right? So call your lending company first. And then at a very high practical level, if you have a loan payment for a vehicle, you could sell the vehicle and pay off the loan, and then shop for maybe a cheaper car or a cheaper mode of transportation to get to work, to find a new job, if that's the scenario. Be careful, because sometimes you borrow money and the item that you borrowed the money for doesn't appreciate in value, it depreciates in value. In the car example, if you took out a $10,000 loan to buy a pretty good used car, relatively new with few miles on it, and a year later you lose your job, when you go to sell that car, it might not be worth $10,000. It might be worth $8,000 because now there's a new model out there, right? So maybe you sell the car for $8,000, and if you've got it set up, dip into savings a little bit and pay off the remaining balance on the loan that you took out to pay for that car, and then sort of reset. So number one, call your creditor or lender. Number 2, look for practical ways to eliminate the debt if you can, and go from there. So those are 2 important steps that you can consider if disaster strikes. Hopefully that doesn't happen, right? Suzanne, we're here right near the end. Were we going to go back to the calculator for any reason? I think that we covered all that.
You've got it. You did a great
Okay.
job on presenting the loan calculator, and just send those the two final slides, we're just going to kind of summarize basically what we've already covered.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so we should be ready to wrap up.
Okay. And I've got, I know Suzanne is recording this, so you'll be able to watch it. I know you'll get a copy of the slide deck. There is a page at the very end that has a link to that loan calculator. Honestly, you can go right to bankrate.com and or just search loan calculator on Google, and something like this will come up that you can use. I just kind of wanted to show you how to use it and stress as a tool how I use it to really model out when I'm trying to decide, even at going all the way back to the beginning of the presentation, if I'm deciding whether or not I should borrow money, right? I go to the loan calculator and I model it out, and then that helps me make an informed decision. So that's a tool to help you as somebody who is seeking to borrow money, give you a picture of what that looks like. And the actual details of your loan with a bank or a lender will maybe be a little bit different. It's not going to be tit for tat, right? It's or one-to-one, but it will model it closely enough that you'll get an idea of what to expect and what questions to ask when you're sitting across from a lender at their desk. So as Suzanne said, the last two slides are really just to sum up here. Remember, ask yourself, why do you need to borrow money? Will I be able to afford the monthly payments? Where's the money coming from? How long will it take me to pay off the money that you borrow? How much interest am I paying? Is this the best borrowing option for my needs? Think about fixed loan versus revolving loan with a credit card. You know, with a fixed loan, you get those payments scheduled out for you and how much you have to pay. It's a fixed set amount. I know I have to pay $140 a month every month until this loan is done. But with a credit card, that's kind of up to you as the borrower, right? You swipe the card and then you have to decide for yourself, how quickly do I want to pay this off? What will my budget allow me to accommodate? Can I pay it all the way off in the first month?
So with the credit card, it's up to you, and it's
is.
also it's less predictable than with the installment loan. So you kind of got to decide what's going to be the best borrowing option for you. Do I go fixed, or do I go with something that kind of varies like a credit card?
That's correct. And you use the word less predictable, and I would also add more flexible, right? With a fixed loan, if your loan payment is $150 a month, there's no changing that, right? It's $150 every month for the next however long you fix that term for. With a credit card, there's a little more flexibility, right? You can choose to make the minimum payment in a month that gets a little bit tight. No, but I wanted you to understand what that means, right? When you make the minimum payment. So for 1 month, maybe not that bad to let it go 1 month if your budget tightens up 1 month. But the next month, and maybe you have a little extra the following month, right? And you put a little bit more on there. It's flexible, but you have to decide, and then you have to stick to it in order for it to work. So it's less predictable in terms of amount of payments, more flexible in terms of amount that you pay, right? But with the understanding that goes along with, when I pay interest on this, it's negative compound interest that goes on forever. So those are important key points of information to understand when you use a credit card versus a fixed loan. And that's what I mean by this last point. What is the best borrowing option for your needs and capabilities? Look before you leap. Think your options through. Wait 24 hours before you swipe your credit card or you go to the bank and borrow money, and just really think it through. Some things you may not be able to get away from borrowing money for. You know, you need a car, you need a place to live. I certainly don't want to pay $40,000 of interest on a $5,000 MacBook though. So those are things to remember. And then remember what happens when you borrow money. You create debt. You are responsible to pay that debt back. Compound interest works against you. We've just been talking about this, so I'm not going to read the whole slide verbatim, but just to round it out, think before you leap. And hopefully in watching this video presentation, you've got a little bit more of an understanding of how sort of what the borrowing basics are and how things work. I can't stress the importance of making payments on time for your debts. That is the #1 criteria that impacts your credit score positively. And remember, we talked about maintaining a good financial debt reputation with your credit score means that you get access to lower interest rates. So it actually costs you less money to move from one phase to the next in your life if you maintain that positive credit history. So thank you so much for having me. The last slide, like I said, is a set of links here. I hope you've learned something, and that's about it. That's where I'm at.
Well, thank you very, very much, Nathan, for that very comprehensive and thorough exploration of what it means and what it involves in terms of borrowing money and how debt and credit is related to that. So we hope that that we have been able to share valuable and helpful information with everyone that will help you in the future in managing your money, managing your borrowing, and managing your debt and credit. And as Nathan mentioned, this is being recorded. And so we're sharing it on the Community Housing Network YouTube site. And so this webinar and the earlier ones in the presentation on budgeting and banking, as well as today's borrowing, will be available to be viewed in the future. So if you want to come back to the presentations, they will be available. So thank you.
Thank you.